Hello and welcome to Margins of Victory. I'm your host, Craig Pintens. My day job is the athletic director at LMU. Really excited for this podcast, which is going to hopefully give you some great revenue generation tips that you can bring back to your campus, to your professional team, to your high school, to wherever. I think there's a lot of great nuggets here. And we had a great first guest, Jim Smith, the athletic director at Maryland. Brand new, fascinating conversation. We touched on a number of great topics, including the fan-friendly pricing when he was with the Falcons, the winning culture with the Atlanta Braves, stratification of tickets. It is a must listen for our first episode. And Jim talks about setting the bar high. He did exactly that. All right. Well, welcome to the inaugural podcast of Margins of Victory, and very excited for our first guest ever. We've got the somewhat brand new AD of University of Maryland, Jim Smith. Just happy to have you join us today, Jim. Thanks for being here.
Hey, Craig, I appreciate it. It's always fun to be first. Let's see how it goes.
Well, the important thing about first is you just got to get on base. I mean, you get on base and let somebody else clean it up after that. So
that's true. I guess I get to set the bar. It's wherever it is, I'm going to set it. So.
Well, let's set it really high. Then we'll aim for the stars. Well, again, appreciate you coming on, and obviously you've had such a unique career. There's probably very few people. If you were to create a Venn diagram of people that have experience in Major League Baseball, the NFL, MLS, WWE, and college sports, that little Venn diagram is pretty small there. So let's start with the obvious question. How do you plan to apply the lessons that you've had from such varied experiences to generating revenue at Maryland?
Yeah, I think it's one of the things that I think does give me a little bit of not an advantage, but an experience that, as you mentioned, that doesn't really exist. Is having seen the different business models operate at different stages in their evolution. Right. So I was in Major League Soccer at year 4, and now it's close to year 30. Right. And you can see what it was like in those early stages. And so you can draw on experiences, even at Maryland, who's been in the Big Ten for almost 12 years now. I'd still say we're in the early stages of the transition into the Big Ten, because when you're joining universities that have been in the Big Ten for 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 years, you can see we're early on in that transition. So you can take those startup experiences, but then you're also in where NFL, where football is huge. So that NFL experience comes into play. And you learn a lot from being in and around an NFL franchise from both the revenue perspective and the football perspective, that really you can lean on skills from those experiences. And then, I'm coming from the Braves organization that really focused on winning and being a championship contender every year. Right. And what were those cultural things that existed at the Braves that I can bring to Maryland that can create that championship culture? And when you can add all those things together, right, and create this really unique experience for fans, I think that's where the revenue comes from. So that was a really long way of answering your question of, hey, all these different experiences in different areas lead to the opportunity to create more revenue in unique ways. And having experienced them gives me a little bit of an advantage.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think the evolution and the time periods of when you were at the different places is absolutely fascinating. Yeah, especially the MLS, being there in its infancy and now obviously what it's become is something entirely different. And obviously the Braves have had a lot of success when you were there, and it's certainly fun to win some championships. But let's dive in a little bit more to the revenue piece, because that's become such a big part of college athletics, and in some ways it always has been. But now with the increased pressure to develop revenue, Maryland's athletic revenue, obviously this information is public, which is a little different than professional sports in some regards, but ranks among the lowest in the Big Ten. And obviously you worked at Ohio State, where their budget and revenue is almost more than double.
Mhm.
Obviously, it's going to take some time to close that gap. But what are kind of your top priorities after just a few months on the job?
Yeah, so I think one thing that you're seeing a lot more of in the pro world, even though they've been doing it, it's really escalating quicker. That I think we can quickly transition into the collegiate space. It's kind of the stratification of the facilities, and in creating different products for different consumers. I think baseball's done that really well. I think the Braves have done it exceptionally well. And stratification is, it can be by row, it can be by seat, it can be by section. And what I can say at Maryland, I'm not sure we've really looked at it that way. So I think that there's real opportunity to show value while raising prices and driving more revenue by doing a stratification and creating new products, right? I mean, it's an oversimplification, but it's one that I would say wasn't a focus in the past.
Yeah, no, I think the stratification concept is fascinating. In my experience, I think I'm curious on this. It seems like you can't price your best tickets high enough, because if you were to compare what they go for on the secondary market, they seem to go for way more than what we're charging a lot of times. And then on your low price tickets seem to go as well. So it kind of leaves this gap in the middle. How does stratification kind of solve that issue? Because it seems like you can sell the really great tickets, you can sell the really bad tickets at a low price. How do you solve those ones, that inventory that is in the middle?
Yeah, I mean that's the $1 million question, right? Literally $1 million question.
No, it could be multi-million depending on where you are. Yeah.
It really is. And so it really starts with, hey, how many different products do you have to offer, right? And how do you squeeze the middle more out by creating better product offerings in that middle to where it is more appealing at a little higher price? And I keep going back to the Braves because it's just where I came from. We just added a right field club, right? And it's not really a club, but it's a semi club. But we took middle inventory that was roughly don't hold me to the numbers, a $30 ticket.
Right.
Created a different product out there, made it a $90 ticket, sold it on a season basis. And all of a sudden we've squeezed the middle again, which then creates demand somewhere else in the ballpark. And I think that's how stratification can work to create demand in the middle, right? It's literally by squeezing it together.
Let's delve into a little bit on pricing, because I think pricing is always a very difficult thing. And in fact, at one point, when I was at the University of Oregon, we called an author that had written a book on consumer pricing and described our situation. We're trying to figure out our pricing, and spent about an hour on the phone, and they said, I don't really know how to price sports tickets. So how do you can obviously use data to do that, clearly, and based on attendance patterns and buying patterns. But what is kind of the simplest way to describe how you look at pricing and how you do set prices?
Yeah, so I think you also have to look at the market you're in, right? And so you got to do like a market landscape survey to know where the price, and we're really fortunate that we have two other football teams in the market. I look at that as a benefit, right? Because it does a couple of things. It gives us a good sense for what people will pay for really good football. That's one. And the second is it gives us two other sets of football fan bases to be able to market to, because we're not competing with the Commanders and the Ravens. So we can make both of those fan bases our team. But by doing a real pricing analysis on how they price, gives us an understanding of what the market will bear. We can also look at the products they offer. There's a lot of comps in our market that we can use. And I'm talking specifically for football, but we can do that for basketball. We can do that for baseball. We can do that for all our sports. So it starts with really looking at what the prices are in the market, where are we in relation to that? Where do we think we can go to? And then, do we have the demand, or have we created the demand enough to sell through at the pricing that we're thinking?
And going off of that, when you're looking at setting pricing, I would assume that you're also looking at multi-year pricing. Like what does it look like? And then you obviously have to adjust it. Is that an accurate statement?
I mean, I think, I'm definitely kind of taking a 3-year approach to kind of how we're going to look at, hey, where we are and where we want to get to. There are variables that come into play there that you have to react to. And I'd like to say, look, I'm also smart enough to know that the job entails a lot here. So while we're talking about this, I also have a chief revenue officer who's got this experience here, who is a partner in creating this strategy with me, in Joe LaBue. And, it's great to have someone to be able to talk to who knows more and is better at it than I am, even though we have good, I've been around a long time. He's been doing it for a long time.
Well, you're clearly very smart, because you always want to surround yourself with people that are smarter in any area than you. It makes your job a lot easier. So that was a good couple hires that you've made early on. One thing I do want to talk about, and it kind of does relate to pricing and the fan experience, because it obviously made a ton of headlines when it happened, and people, I think, really started to take a serious look at it. But with the Falcons, let's talk about the fan-friendly pricing that you had at games. That kind of lowered the concession prices. I think the graphics, whatever you guys did from a PR standpoint, it was everywhere, and obviously that was done to attract more families. I'm just curious, from an idea, and I think people that are hopefully listening can really use this as an example. But from an idea, how did that kind of originate, and then how did you implement it and actually execute it? And then, kind of a side question on that, how did the business office react when you brought this to them?
Yeah, great. Well, there's a lot of questions in there, so if I don't answer one of them, let me know.
Okay.
But let me tell you kind of how it started. So I always believe, in whatever role I've been in, one of my best friends in the building, I try to have, is the CFO, right? And it just so happened at the time, our offices were next to each other, and I got to know Greg Beatles, who now is the president of the Falcons and is doing an incredible job. And so he and I were driving back from the Masters, or driving back from Augusta. And this was during the stadium planning process. And we started talking about what an incredible experience that we had at Augusta. And if anybody's ever been, back in the days that we were talking about it, it was a $3 beer and a $1.50 pimento cheese sandwich, and you couldn't get your mind around this is really something special. So we just started talking about, hey, what if we did that in the new stadium? Now, also know, we had an owner who absolutely put the fan at the center of the experience. So this was something that we were looking at. Hey, well, how are we going to differentiate ourselves going into a new stadium? And we believe that Augusta and the Masters kind of showed us the way that, hey, you can do this. You can deliver a quality product. You can do it at a relatively inexpensive, at that point, it was a very inexpensive price. And the fans would react really positively to it, and you will get great momentum from it. So that was the hypothesis that, we took back and said, well, no one's doing it. And it was an interesting conversation when we were talking to the food service providers about our idea, because we were going to hire a new concessionaire to operate for us. And, they had their thoughts on it. And I'll say one of them was, we asked the question too, and I'll never forget the answer was, we asked the question, why hasn't anybody done this before? And the guy was completely honest, and he says, because of you. And we were like, because of us? And they said, yeah, you want high margins, you want high quality, you want this, you want that, and you want us to have a price that is going to be a lot less. And so we all looked at each other and said, okay, well, we don't want to do that. You work for us, and you're on a management fee, and we're going to set the prices. And that's how it all came about. But again, it started with an owner who was definitely committed to it. And if you and there's the Mercedes-Benz Stadium and the Falcons in Atlanta United still get enormous credit for having fan-friendly pricing on the core staples in the building, but know that they've got a lot of high-end offerings, right? So it wasn't that everything was priced there. It was that, hey, there was something at a price point for everybody in the building. And I think that's a really good formula for success in businesses, that revenue stream is important, but isn't super important.
Yeah, no, fantastic. I think the lesson I learned from that is sometimes it is you. You know, you do need to look at yourself a little bit in terms of why something exists, and so that is a fascinating thing, and obviously got a bunch of great attention at the time, and I think it did have people look a little harder at what they're doing outside the just the ticket side, because I think so many people obviously focus on that. The one thing we haven't really talked about is, you know, you do have significant experience in college athletics. Started your career in college athletics, you know, and then was at Ohio State with the Alumni Association and had some record numbers there. How are you going to leverage that fundraising experience and engage the alumni and donors? Because that is something that is somewhat unique to college athletics.
It is. Look, I think the one thing I took away from that experience was I think we created a really unique. I'm talking about when I was at the Alumni Association, and we created a really unique approach to engagement. When you have a large alumni base and figuring out a way to connect with them, we created something called an engagement center, and it was before AI, so I'm sure it's evolved quite a bit since the time we created it, because it was a lot of creativity, a lot of human work that went into just letting Ohio State alumni know that Ohio State was thinking of them, right? And it was part of this being on a fan journey, right? An alumni journey is basically what it is. And I think we can do that in college athletics as well. I mean, we can create journeys for our fans, both our alumni fans and just our fans that are in the community. And I think that engagement strategy, I think, was the right thing to do, because it led to a lot of new donors from the alumni perspective. But I think it's the right thing to do to connect fans closer to our programs. And I think, you know, we'll definitely be exploring that concept as we go forward. And then there is a monetization strategy to it, but that comes after the fact. I don't think we can go into it thinking, hey, we're going to create all this content, it's going to be engaging, and people are going to pay for it. I think it's, you know, a little bit closer to the freemium model of the old days, where if you start with the right intent, and this goes back to the food piece. If you do it for the right reasons, you'll get the right results, right? And so if we start this process with the right reasons, I think we'll get the right results.
So would you consider that kind of that alumni relationship is no different than in some respects a season ticket holder relationship, where it starts as, you know, very few people are going to just purchase a season ticket without ever having gone to a game before, and so you kind of move them up the escalator concept.
So absolutely, it's a segmentation strategy, right? You have a certain number of your fans that are interested in single game tickets. You have a certain number that are going to come to multiple games. You're going to have a certain number that are coming to full. It's the same thing in annual giving. I love the story that they told me that, you know, Bloomberg's first gift to Johns Hopkins was $10, and he's given $1 billion. And so you don't know where your next enormous gift is. So start people on the continuum, give them a product that they really like, make them feel really valued, and grow them over time.
Well, what I heard there, Jim, is we just need to get a lot of $10 donors and try to hit the lottery. That's what I heard.
Well, there's a little bit of that. You know,
Okay.
you never know, because you never know where it's going to come from. And if you don't
Right.
get the first $10, you're not going to. Rarely do they start at $1 billion.
Yeah, no, that's probably true. Yeah, you can't just walk in with the $1 billion proposal. That might not go that well.
Yeah.
College, obviously, college athletics and higher ed on even a larger scale, and we could devote a whole podcast just to that. But there's been so many significant changes that have occurred, and obviously the revenue sharing piece has come in. I guess I'm more curious on how you create kind of awareness of Maryland student athletes and their personal brand so that they can kind of capture some of that money that is maybe outside there. And what are your just initial thoughts as you've kind of started with that?
So timing's perfect for how we're continuing to educate our student athletes on the opportunity. I just left the football team meeting in which a number of our I got to address the team, but all the different departments come in and talk about the opportunities that exist, right, for these student athletes. And we do this with each of our teams, right? So they understand, hey, here are the opportunities that here are the rules to follow to achieve them, and let us know how we can help as we go forward. So it's a big it's a constant, Craig. It's a constant education. You know, we're never going to stop kind of explaining to people how it works, how they can capitalize on it. A lot of us use open doors. There's other opportunities that are out there to where we can direct our student athletes. But think of it from a student athlete perspective, right? They're students, they're athletes, and they're marketing themselves, right? So it's a lot. So wherever we can help educate to make it a little bit easier is part of our opportunity and our obligation.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the education, especially with the changing landscape and you know what is true today might not be true tomorrow, based on the last couple years. That's for sure. You touched on it a little bit earlier with the hiring of Joe LaBue, and obviously you hired Diana as well from Utah State. So a couple really key hires after you start. Just curious, what does each of them kind of contribute to kind of support your vision for what Maryland can be?
First, they're both smarter than I am, so that's usually
Good start. Yeah, good start. Yeah, that's really good.
To bring people in who really can complement your strengths, right? And so it's so fortunate to have both of them come to Maryland. You know, Diana obviously has sat in a chair. She understands the responsibilities that come with it. She also understands what Big Ten college football looks like from both the conference standpoint and her time at Ohio State, and can help us develop that championship culture with all our sports in a really, what I hope in a fast way, right? Where we're raising the expectations. We believe we can achieve more. And she's a big reason why people believe we can achieve more. And then with Joe, bringing back a Terp, bringing, a Maryland grad, passionate for his university, with incredible experience in growing revenue streams and leading, organizations, gives us a chance to operate differently and at a higher level than maybe we've had the opportunity to operate in the past. Not that not that we've operated poorly, but we can bring another different vision and skill set in to our department that can grow us quickly. And to your point that you made earlier, Craig, Maryland is towards the bottom from a revenue perspective in the Big Ten, and we believe that in this market we have a lot of opportunity, and Joe's definitely going to be able to help us get there.
Yeah, no, two fantastic hires, and certainly so important, especially as you step in to surround yourself with people that are smarter than you, but also people that are really, really good at what they do. So commend you for those two, because it is going to really make a big impact. Going back to kind of your hiring and kind of the process, which obviously can be a long one sometimes, but in the press conference, the president mentioned that you presented some new ideas that really excited people. And we don't need all the state secrets here, but can you give us a hint at maybe one or two of the creative initiatives that you maybe brought up or you're considering to boost revenue. And again, we don't need you to reveal something that's really good because we don't want somebody else to take that.
No, look, I'm great about sharing, but I'd rather share it after it works than put it out there.
Smart man.
So that's that's a little bit of it. In general, I'll try to talk about it in general terms, right? I talked about the market, right? And I look at our, the revenue. I tend to oversimplify, Craig, because I'm a pretty simple guy, which is why I hired really smart people around me. So the oversimplification piece is, hey, we're in a market of 8 million, 6 to 8 million. There's an enormous in filling buildings. Well, no matter what building it is a math equation, and the math is in both true numbers and effort. And so there's a little bit of a math formula that's, I'm certainly not a calculus teacher, but that's got traditional math with effort and some marketing that when you put it all together, you can achieve a lot. And I talked about and, not or. Like, we can be successful in football and field hockey, right? We can create great experiences at both. And so I'm not an or guy, I'm an and guy. And there's a way to figure it out, but it requires math and effort and marketing to be able to do that. So that's part one. I talked about stratification. We touched on that earlier. If you come to Maryland, you'll see a couple of different opportunity or options that are available, but there's not a lot. We're adding some. They started adding some even before I got here. I think that there's a lot more opportunity from a stratification standpoint. I think dynamic pricing has been underutilized in college athletics, and I think we can do a lot more of it. I think AI can definitely help. We talked a lot about AI, and it wasn't just because I knew the audience. The president is an engineer. He's very much into AI. We've been using some AI, so I'm a believer that that's a tool that to help us grow. And I think there's ways to deploy it that will help not just grow our fan base, but grow our revenue streams. And then I think there's an affinity play here that has been maybe not fully explored, and that's another piece of it that I'll just kind of leave from a general perspective. That perhaps there's an interesting affinity play that hasn't been done yet. So that's not a credit card or a debit card or anything like that. It's something very different. So those are just some of the things that we touched on. I don't know if any of those were resonated or.
No, hey, I asked for one or two and you gave me about 6 or 7. I can see why you got the job. That worked out. No, I think the dynamic pricing piece to me is fascinating because obviously introduced a long time ago, really, with the San Francisco Giants, and various people have tried it. I think colleges have experimented a little bit with it, but it really wasn't something that has been done on a large scale. And to that point, it's only better now with AI and some of the data generation and analytics that can be placed on it. So fascinating to see how that potentially works there.
Yeah, it really will be interesting in how we all adapt to it. Like I said, I don't know that was anything that anyone's not doing or thinking about, but it was one of the things that we did talk about during the process.
Yeah, absolutely makes sense. Well, Jim, you've covered so much on revenue generation. This has been fantastic. I hope the people that are listening got a couple good nuggets out there and can use them. But I do have one more question for you. And I think this is the most important one that we're going to have. And you can learn a lot about a person by this question. So I'm putting a lot of pressure on you here.
Okay.
But who is your all-time favorite athlete and why?
All-time favorite athlete. Okay, so you have to go with what comes to mind first, right? So it's my Maryland friends won't love this, but it's Michael Jordan, right?
Okay.
And so I was in school at Northwestern during the Jordan era. So he started there, and it's just some way. I think that was a really special time to see someone kind of emerge. So I'll probably put Jordan there.
How was The Last Dance?
Really good.
Yeah, very good.
You're really good.
Well, thank you, Jim. You've been fantastic. I think you did set the bar really high, and that's something that other guests in the future, if we ever do another one of these, maybe it's just one and done. I mean,
One and
it might
done.
be so good that the bar we can't get there again.
Hey, there are a lot, like I said before, there are a lot of smarter people out there that that your listeners will learn a lot from. So I know they're out there, and I know they'll take the bar even higher.
All right. Well, thank you again, Jim.
All right. Thanks, Craig.